The moon cast long shadows across the palace gardens as Maria pressed herself against the cold stone wall. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared the guards might hear it echoing through the night air. She had been planning this moment for weeks, studying the patrol patterns, memorizing every turn and corner of the vast royal grounds. Tonight was different from all her previous visits. Tonight she carried news that would change everything. Inside the Eastern Tower, Prince Alexander waited by his window, his eyes scanning the darkness below. He had received her coded message that morning, hidden within the binding of a book delivered to the royal library. The simple phrase, "When shadows dance longest," told him she would come after midnight. His fingers drummed nervously against the windowsill as he watched for any sign of movement in the gardens. Maria had first entered the palace 6 months earlier as a seamstress, one of many hired to prepare the elaborate costumes for the harvest festival. Her nimble fingers and keen eye for detail had quickly earned her a permanent position. But it was not her skill with needle and thread that had captured the prince's attention. It was the way she had looked at him when their eyes met across the great hall, unflinching and unafraid, seeing him not as royalty, but as a man. Their friendship had begun innocently enough. Alexander, weary of the constant flattery and false smiles of court life, found himself drawn to Maria's honesty. She spoke to him of life beyond the palace walls, of struggles and joys he had never known. In return, he shared his dreams of becoming a different kind of ruler, one who understood his people's true needs. The first secret meeting had been an accident. Maria had stayed late to finish embroidering a ceremonial robe, and Alexander had wandered into the sewing room, unable to sleep. They talked until dawn broke over the kingdom, and both knew their lives had irrevocably changed. What followed were months of stolen moments, whispered conversations in empty corridors, and messages passed through trusted servants. King Ferdinand, Alexander's father, ruled with an iron fist wrapped in silk. His spies were everywhere, his network of informants stretching from the highest nobles to the lowest kitchen servants. He believed in order above all else, in maintaining the boundaries between royalty and common folk. Marriage alliances were tools of statecraft, not matters of the heart. Alexander knew this, had always known this, yet he could not stop himself from falling deeper into the dangerous dance with Maria. The garden gate creaked softly as Maria slipped through. She had oiled the hinges herself during her last visit, but the ancient metal still protested. Every sound seemed magnified in the stillness of the night. She moved like a shadow, her dark cloak blending with the hedges and trees. The guards were changing shifts now, she knew. She had exactly 12 minutes to reach the tower. Inside his chamber, Alexander lit a single candle, the signal that it was safe for her to climb the hidden rope he had secured outside his window. His hands trembled slightly as he helped her over the ledge. In the flickering candlelight, he could see tears glistening in her eyes. "What has happened?" he whispered, pulling her close. Maria's voice shook as she spoke. "Your father knows. Not everything, but enough. One of the kitchen maids saw me leaving the tower 3 nights ago. She reported it to the head of household, who reported it to the king's secretary." Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. "Are you certain?" "My friend in the kitchens overheard them discussing it. They plan to question me tomorrow. And there's more." She paused, gathering courage. "The king has finalized your betrothal. The Princess of Moldavia will arrive within the fortnight." The prince sank onto his bed, his mind racing. He had known this day would come, had tried to prepare himself for it, but the reality hit him like a physical blow. "We knew this was temporary," he said, though the words tasted bitter. "Did we?" Maria asked, sitting beside him. "Or did we hope that somehow things would change?" They sat in silence, hands clasped, as the weight of their situation settled upon them. Outside, an owl hooted mournfully, and the wind rustled through the trees. The palace, which had been Maria's workplace and their secret meeting ground, now felt like a prison closing in around them. "There is a way," Alexander said suddenly, his voice firm with newfound resolve. "My cousin in Francia, he owes me a great debt. If we could reach his estates—" "You would give up your throne?" Maria asked, searching his face. "What good is a throne if I must sit upon it alone, making decisions with a heart turned to stone? What kind of king would I become, married to a woman I do not love, growing bitter with each passing year?" Maria touched his face gently. "The kind of king your father is." Those words hung between them, heavy with truth. Alexander had watched his father rule for 25 years, had seen how the crown had changed him, hardened him. His mother, married for political alliance, had died young, some said, of a broken heart. The palace was full of such ghosts, shadows of what might have been. "Then we leave," Alexander decided. "Tomorrow night, during the feast of St. Catherine. The court will be distracted. The guards will have wine. We can slip away in the confusion." Maria shook her head. "Your father's men will hunt us. You know this. And what of your people? You speak always of being a different kind of king, of helping them. How can you help them from exile?" "How can I help them if I become everything I despise?" he countered. "Maria, I have gold hidden away, enough to start a new life. We could go to the new world, where titles mean less than courage and hard work." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in this dream he was spinning. But she knew King Ferdinand better than Alexander did, had seen the cold calculation in his eyes when he reviewed the household accounts, had heard the stories of what happened to those who defied him. "We need more time to plan," she said finally. "If we're to do this, we must do it right. One chance is all we'll have." Alexander nodded, knowing she was right. "Return to your quarters now before the next patrol. Tomorrow, act as if nothing has changed. I'll find a way to delay the questioning. Perhaps send you on an errand to the city." As Maria prepared to leave, she turned back to him one last time. "Whatever happens, know that these months have been worth any price I might pay." "Don't speak as if this is goodbye," Alexander said fiercely. "This is just another challenge to overcome." But as Maria disappeared into the darkness, both felt the weight of impending fate. The hidden visitor had become something more dangerous, a catalyst for change that would ripple through the kingdom. Neither could know that their every word that night had been heard, that even now a figure stood in the secret passage behind the tower wall, listening and remembering everything. The game they had been playing was about to enter its final, most perilous phase. Dawn broke gray and cold over the palace, matching Maria's mood as she went about her morning duties. Her hands moved automatically, folding linens and sorting threads, while her mind raced through possible escape routes. The other seamstresses chattered around her, excited about the upcoming feast, unaware that their colleague was planning to disappear forever. The summons came at midday, delivered by a page with downcast eyes. "You are required in the blue chamber," he said quietly. "Immediately." Maria's blood ran cold. The blue chamber was where official interrogations took place, where the king's justice was dispensed. She had expected this, but not so soon. As she walked through the palace corridors, servants averted their eyes. Word traveled fast in the palace, and everyone knew that being summoned to the blue chamber rarely ended well. To her surprise, she found not the king's secretary waiting for her, but Prince Alexander himself, pacing before the great fireplace. His face was pale, his usual composure cracked. "I've bought us time," he said without preamble. "I told them I needed you to complete urgent work on my ceremonial robes for the betrothal ceremony. They believed me, but only just. We have perhaps 2 days, no more." "The feast is tomorrow night," Maria reminded him. I know. I've arranged everything. My trusted groom has prepared 2 horses in the old stable, the one that hasn't been used since my grandfather's time. We'll leave separately during the height of the celebrations and meet at the mill pond beyond the village. Maria noticed the leather satchel tucked behind a chair. You've already packed? Gold, provisions, and commoners' clothes. We'll need to travel fast and light. From the mill, we ride hard for the coast. I've sent word ahead to a captain who asks few questions. By the time anyone realizes we're gone, we'll be at sea. And then, the colonies, a new life. He took her hands in his. Are you certain this is what you want? Once we leave, there's no returning. Maria squeezed his hands tightly. I was certain the moment I realized I loved you more than my own safety. They spent the next hour going over every detail of their plan, which servants could be trusted to misdirect questions, which routes to take through the palace, what to do if they were separated. Alexander gave her a man's traveling cloak and boots that would be easier to ride in. Hide these in the old garden shed, he instructed. Tomorrow, during the feast, slip away when the 3rd course is served. The musicians will be at their loudest then, and most of the guards will be watching the entertainment. That night, Maria barely slept. She lay in her narrow bed in the servants' quarters, listening to the breathing of her roommates, memorizing the sound. These women had become her friends, her confidants in everything but her greatest secret. She would miss them, miss the familiar rhythm of palace life, even miss the work that had given her purpose and pride. The day of the feast dawned bright and clear. The palace buzzed with activity as final preparations were made. Great tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, elaborate pastries, and exotic fruits brought from distant lands. Musicians tuned their instruments, acrobats practiced their routines, and the nobility began arriving in their finest clothes. Maria forced herself to act normally, helping the other seamstresses with last-minute adjustments to various courtiers' outfits. Her fingers trembled only slightly as she worked, and if anyone noticed, they attributed it to the general excitement. As evening approached, she excused herself, claiming a headache from the heat of the pressing irons. In the garden shed, she quickly changed into the men's clothes Alexander had provided. The rough wool felt strange against her skin, but the freedom of movement was liberating. She tucked her hair under a cap, wrapped the cloak around herself, and slipped out into the gathering dusk. The feast was in full swing as she made her way along the edges of the palace grounds. Music and laughter spilled from the great hall, punctuated by the clink of glasses and silver. Through the windows, she could see Alexander at the high table, playing his part perfectly, smiling and conversing with the guests. Only someone who knew him as well as she did would notice the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept flickering toward the doors. She was almost at the outer wall when footsteps behind her made her freeze. Slowly, she turned to find herself face to face with Captain Marcus, the head of the palace guard. Her heart sank. Of all the people to encounter, he was the worst. Loyal to the king above all else, he had a reputation for seeing through any deception. Going somewhere, seamstress? His voice was calm, almost conversational. Maria's mind raced. I was feeling ill, sir, the heat from the kitchens. I needed air. In men's clothing? With a travel cloak? He stepped closer, and she could see pity in his eyes alongside duty. Did you really think we weren't watching? Every move you've made these past 2 days has been reported. Tears began to flow down Maria's face, not from fear, but from the crushing realization that their plan had been doomed from the start. How long have you known? About your meetings with the prince? Months. The king ordered us to observe but not interfere. He wanted to see how far his son would go, whether this was a passing fancy or something more dangerous. And what is your verdict? Marcus sighed heavily. That 2 young people have confused passion with love and are about to throw away their lives for a dream that cannot be. "You know nothing of our feelings," Maria said fiercely, tears still streaming. "Perhaps not. But I know the world, child. I know what happens to princes who abandon their duty and common girls who reach above their station. It never ends well." From the direction of the stables came the sound of horses and shouting. Maria's heart lurched. Alexander must have realized something was wrong and left early. More guards appeared, surrounding her, though they made no move to touch her. "Take her to the White Tower," Marcus ordered. "Comfortable quarters, but secured. The king will decide her fate after he's dealt with his son." As they led her away, Maria looked back one last time at the palace blazing with light and celebration. Somewhere in that golden glow, Alexander was discovering that his carefully laid plans had crumbled. She wondered if he would try to fight, to argue, or if he would submit to his father's will. The White Tower was used for noble prisoners, those who had committed crimes against the crown, but whose rank demanded certain courtesies. Maria found herself in a small but well-appointed room with a narrow window overlooking the courtyard. She pressed her face against the cool glass, watching as guards scurried below like ants, coordinating the search for their missing prince. Hours passed. The feast sounds gradually died away, replaced by the urgent tempo of a manhunt. Torches blazed throughout the grounds, and she could hear horses being saddled, dogs being roused. Then, just as the moon reached its zenith, the activity suddenly ceased. They had found him. Maria watched as a small group of riders returned through the main gate. Even from her high window, she could recognize Alexander's bearing, though his head was bowed. King Ferdinand himself walked out to meet them, his red robes making him look like a flame in the torchlight. Father and son faced each other for a long moment, then turned and entered the palace together. She sank onto the narrow bed, finally allowing herself to fully weep. Not for herself, she had known the risks from the beginning, but for Alexander, for the choice that was being taken from him, for the man he might have become if the world had been different. A soft knock at her door interrupted her tears. A serving woman entered with a tray of food and a sealed letter. Maria recognized Alexander's seal immediately. With shaking hands, she broke the wax and read, "My dearest, they stopped me at the border of our lands. I fought, but what good is one sword against 20? My father offers me a choice: submit to the marriage and my duty, or face exile without lands, title, or resources. He knows me too well, knows I would accept exile with you, but not exile that would see you starve in poverty because of my choices. Forgive me for failing you. Forgive me for not being strong enough to find another way. Know that whatever comes next, you have changed me forever. You showed me what it means to truly live. I will try to be the king you believed I could be, even if my heart breaks with every decision. They tell me you will be sent away tomorrow, given gold enough to start anew somewhere far from here. Take it and live well. Be happy, if you can. And sometimes, when the moon casts long shadows, remember that somewhere a king thinks of you. Forever yours in spirit, if not in flesh. Alexander." The letter fell from her numb fingers. Through her tears, she could see servants beginning to prepare the palace for a royal wedding, hanging garlands and ribbons. The transformation of her sorrow into their celebration felt like a cruel mockery. Tomorrow she would leave this place forever, carrying only memories and a broken heart. The tearful escape she had imagined, riding free with her love beside her, had become a solitary journey into exile. As dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Maria made her own choice. She would take the king's gold, yes, but not to start a new life of her own. She would use it to help others like herself, those whose only crime was loving beyond their station. Perhaps one day, when Alexander sat upon the throne, he would hear of her work and know that their love had not been entirely in vain. The escape had not gone as planned, but it was still an escape, from a life of watching him with another, from the daily torture of proximity without possibility. Her tears were not just of sorrow, but of a strange, painful freedom. King Ferdinand stood alone in his private study, a room few had ever entered. The walls were lined with leather-bound volumes, treaties and histories that told the story of his realm. But tonight, his attention was fixed on a different kind of record. A series of reports that lay spread across his desk, each one detailing the secret romance between his son and the seamstress. He had known from the beginning, of course. Very little happened in his palace without his knowledge. The first report had come from his spy master within days of that initial meeting in the sewing room. Ferdinand had read it with a mixture of amusement and concern. Young men had their dalliances. It was expected, even healthy. But as the reports continued, as the meetings became more frequent and the attachment deeper, his concern had grown. Now, in the aftermath of the failed escape, Ferdinand allowed himself a moment of reflection. Through the window, he could see the courtyard where Maria would depart in just a few hours. Even now, she maintained her dignity, her back straight as she was led to a comfortable carriage, not a prisoner's wagon. He had insisted on that small mercy, though few would understand why. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he commanded. Prince Alexander stepped inside, his face a mask of controlled emotion. Father and son regarded each other across the vast desk, across the gulf of years and choices that separated them. "She departs within the hour," Ferdinand said quietly. "I've ensured she will want for nothing. A cottage in the southern provinces, far from court, with income enough to live comfortably." "How generous of you," Alexander replied, bitterness seeping through his careful words. Ferdinand rose and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Do you think me cruel, my son?" "I think you are what you have always been, a king first, a father second." "And what would you have me be? A father who allows his son to destroy his life for a passion that would burn bright and brief before leaving nothing but ashes?" Alexander's composure cracked. "How can you know it would have burned out? How can you be so certain that what we felt wasn't real?" For the first time in years, Ferdinand allowed genuine emotion to cross his face. He reached into a hidden drawer in his desk and withdrew a small, worn portrait. The painting showed a young woman with laughing eyes and dark hair, dressed in the simple clothes of a merchant's daughter. "Her name was Isabella," the king said softly. "I met her when I was just a year older than you are now. She worked in her father's shop in the market district. I would disguise myself as a common soldier just to spend a few moments in her presence." Alexander stared at the portrait, stunned into silence. "For 3 months we met in secret. I planned to renounce my throne, to flee with her to a place where we could simply be Ferdinand and Isabella. Not prince and commoner. I had it all arranged. Passage on a ship, a small farm in a distant province, a life of honest work and true love." "What happened?" Alexander asked, though he feared he knew the answer. "My father happened. Your grandfather was not as patient as I have been. He had Isabella's family arrested on false charges of sedition. He gave me the same choice I have given you, my duty or her life. If I accepted my responsibilities, married as befitted my station, her family would be quietly released and compensated for their troubles. If I persisted in my foolishness, they would face trial and execution." The king turned from the window, and Alexander saw tears in his father's eyes, something he had never witnessed before. "I chose duty, as I knew I must. Isabella was sent away. Her family relocated to a distant city with gold enough to start anew. I received word, years later, that she had married a kind man, a silversmith who gave her children and a good life. She died last winter, surrounded by grandchildren who will never know how close their grandmother came to being queen. And you've regretted it ever since, Alexander said. No. Ferdinand's voice was firm. I've mourned it, yes. But regretted? How could I regret a choice that led to peace with our neighbors, to the prosperity our people now enjoy, to you and your sisters? Isabella would have made a lovely queen, but the nobles would never have accepted her. There would have been civil war, bloodshed, chaos. How many would have died for our love? So you became the king they wanted, cold, calculating, caring only for politics and power. Ferdinand smiled sadly. Is that what you see? Then I have played my part too well. Every decision I have made, every alliance forged, every tradition upheld, all of it has been to prevent our kingdom from tearing itself apart. The nobles accept my rule because I am one of them, because I follow the forms they expect. The people prosper because there is stability, because the harvests are not burned in civil wars. He moved to his desk, picking up one of the reports about Maria. This girl, she is intelligent, kind, skilled in her craft. In another world, she might indeed have made a worthy queen. But we do not live in that world, my son. We live in this one, where a seamstress on the throne would be seen as an insult to every noble family, where your children would be considered bastards no matter how legitimate the marriage, where kingdoms would see our perceived weakness and attack. Things could change, Alexander argued, though with less conviction than before. Yes, they could. They are changing slowly. Your son, or perhaps his son, might live in a world where love can triumph over tradition. But that change must come gradually, or it will come in blood. Your marriage to the Princess of Moldavia will secure our eastern border, will bring trade agreements that feed our people, will prevent a war that would kill thousands. Is your happiness worth those lives? Alexander sank into a chair, the weight of kingship settling upon his shoulders for the first time. How do you bear it? By remembering that the crown is not a prize but a burden, by finding what happiness I can in duty well done. Your mother, may she rest in peace, understood this. We never had what I felt with Isabella, but we had respect, partnership, purpose. We raised you and your sisters to be strong and wise. That is its own kind of love. And Maria? What becomes of her in your grand design? Ferdinand was quiet for a moment. I have watched her these past months, through my reports and my own observations. She has a strength that reminds me of Isabella. She will survive this, perhaps even thrive. The gold I'm providing is substantial, enough for her to establish herself in business if she chooses. My agents will watch over her from a distance, ensure she is not troubled by those who might seek to exploit her connection to our house. You would make her your ward without her knowing it. I would give her the chance at a life of her own choosing, which is more than most in her position receive. In time, she will marry, have children, build something lasting, and you, my son, will do the same. The Princess of Moldavia is intelligent and kind. She speaks 4 languages and has innovative ideas about agricultural reform. You may find, in time, that partnership can grow into affection. Alexander stood to leave, then paused at the door. Did you ever see Isabella again? Once, Ferdinand admitted, 20 years after we parted. I was traveling incognito through her city and saw her in the market with her children. She was laughing at something her daughter had said, and for a moment, time stopped. Our eyes met across the square. She recognized me, I'm certain of it, but she simply inclined her head slightly, gathered her children, and walked away. That was when I knew I had made the right choice. She was happy, truly happy, in a way she never could have been as queen. As Alexander left, Ferdinand returned to his window. Below, Maria's carriage was preparing to depart. On impulse, he descended the private staircase that led to the courtyard, emerging into the morning light. Maria, about to enter the carriage, saw him and froze. The king of the realm stood before her, not in his ceremonial robes but in simple clothing, looking older and more tired than she had ever seen him. "Your Majesty," she said, dropping into a curtsy. "Rise, child," he said gently. "I would speak with you briefly before you go." She stood, meeting his eyes with the same unflinching gaze that had first attracted his son. "You think me a monster?" It was not a question. "I think you are a king," Maria replied carefully. "Yes, I am, and because I am king, I must tell you something that my son cannot. You have given him a gift greater than you know. You have shown him that he has a heart capable of deep love, of sacrifice, of putting another's well-being above his own desires. These are the qualities that will make him a great king, though he cannot see it now." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "And what of my gift, Your Majesty? What of my heart?" Ferdinand reached into his cloak and withdrew a small leather pouch. "This is not from the crown, but from a father who understands more than you might believe. Inside, you will find a letter of introduction to the Guild of Weavers in the southern city of Rosehaven. They are expecting you, should you choose to use it. The master there is the finest in the realm and has agreed to take you as a journeyman, despite your gender. What you do with this opportunity is your choice entirely." Maria took the pouch with trembling hands. "Why?" "Because strength such as yours should not be wasted. Because my son is not the only one who must live with choices made for the greater good. And because, perhaps, one act of kindness might balance the scales of necessary cruelty." He turned to go, then looked back one last time. "Take care of yourself, Maria of the palace. May you find the happiness that kings and princes cannot." As the carriage rolled away, Ferdinand climbed slowly back to his tower study. Alexander would be preparing for his betrothal ceremony now, donning the robes Maria herself had embroidered with such care. The Princess of Moldavia would arrive tomorrow, and the business of kingdom building would continue. But for just this moment, the king allowed himself to watch and remember. Through his window, he could see Maria's carriage growing smaller in the distance, carrying away another young woman's dreams and his son's heart. He had been watching all along, from the shadows of secret passages and through the eyes of his spies. He had watched love bloom and calculated its cost. He had watched his son learn the hardest lesson of royalty, that the heart must often be sacrificed for the crown. As the sun climbed higher, painting the palace walls gold, Ferdinand returned to his desk and the endless papers that demanded his attention. But he kept Isabella's portrait on the desk now, no longer hidden away. A reminder that even kings had once been young men who believed love could conquer all. In the years that followed, Alexander would indeed become a great king, wise and just, beloved by his people. He would speak often of the importance of duty and sacrifice, and none but his father would know the personal price of that wisdom. Maria would become the master weaver of Rosehaven, creating tapestries of such beauty that they graced palaces and temples across the continent. She never married, but she took in orphans and taught them her craft, creating a different kind of family. And sometimes, on nights when the moon cast long shadows, a king would stand at his window and think of choices made and unmade, of love sacrificed and kingdoms preserved. He would watch in silence as he had always watched, bearing the weight of necessary sorrows. The hidden visitor, the tearful escape, and the watching king, all had played their parts in a story as old as crowns and thrones. But perhaps, in the playing, they had each found their own kind of freedom. For Maria, the freedom to forge her own destiny. For Alexander, the freedom that comes from understanding the true cost of power. And for Ferdinand, the freedom of knowing that his vigilance, however painful, had protected the realm and perhaps, in its own way, protected the young lovers from a harsher fate. In the end, The greatest love stories are not always those that end in union, but those that transform us, that teach us who we are and who we might become. And in the palace where shadows still dance in moonlight, that truth echoes through the corridors of power, a whispered reminder that even kings must sometimes choose between their hearts and their crowns.